The entire market fell silent the moment Kira stepped through the archway. And it wasn't because of her luminescent silver hair or the way her pointed ears caught the morning light, it was because of the 3 Vrakken cubs padding behind her on massive paws, their obsidian claws clicking against the stone street. Every merchant, every shopper, every child froze mid-motion, their eyes wide with the ancient instinct that screams predator, run, hide, survive. Kira felt their fear like a physical weight pressing against her chest, but she kept walking, kept her spine straight, kept her voice gentle as she whispered over her shoulder, "Stay close, little ones. Don't wander." The smallest cub, Ash, pressed against her leg, and she felt the vibration of his nervous purr through the fabric of her tactical pants. 6 weeks ago, she would have been just as terrified as everyone in this market. 6 weeks ago, she didn't know that the galaxy's most feared predators could look at you with eyes full of confusion and loss. 6 weeks ago, she found them huddled around their mother's cooling body in the wreckage of a transport crash just outside the settlement, 3 tiny apocalypses waiting to happen, mewing with hunger and fear. Her people, the Seraph, were prey species, our entire evolutionary history written in the language of running, hiding, detecting danger before it detected us. Every instinct in her body had screamed to run when she first saw them. But then the smallest one, Ash, had looked up at her with those huge amber eyes, and she heard herself make the most illogical decision of her life. "It's okay. I've got you." Now, standing in the center of Merchant Square with 3 Vrakken cubs who didn't understand why everyone looked so afraid, Kira wondered if that decision was about to get her exiled from her own community. She could feel the stares, hear the whispered conversations starting up like a gathering storm. Old Merchant Thrall actually backed away from his fruit stand, his forearms crossing protectively over his chest. "Kira," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic, "what have you brought into our market?" She met his gaze steadily, even though her heart hammered against her ribs. "They're children, Thrall. They're hungry, and they need to eat." The middle cub, Ember, had noticed the fruit stand now, his head tilting in that curious way that meant his brain was cataloging everything, analyzing, learning. He padded forward slowly, and Kira saw Thrall flinch. "Ember, gentle," she said softly, and the cub immediately slowed, approaching the stand with exaggerated care. He stood on his hind legs, already tall enough to rest his front paws on the counter despite being only 3 months old, and stared at a pile of golden vanda fruit. His nose twitched, processing scents that Kira's limited Seraph senses couldn't even detect. Then he turned his massive head to look at her, and in his rumbling, growling voice that still held the higher pitch of youth, he asked, "Is this food?" The question hit Kira with unexpected force, and she realized that everyone had heard it too. The market seemed to hold its breath. These weren't mindless killing machines. These were children who didn't know what a fruit was because they'd lost their mother before she could teach them about the galaxy. "Yes," Kira said gently, moving to stand beside Ember. She picked up one of the vanda fruits, its skin warm from the morning sun. "This is food. It's sweet, from a plant. Your kind doesn't usually eat these, but they won't hurt you." Ember sniffed the fruit carefully, then gently, so gently it made her chest ache, took it from her hand with his teeth. He bit down, and immediately his face scrunched up in the Vrakken equivalent of disgust, his tongue lolling out. "Sweet," he rumbled, setting the fruit down. "Not good. Too sweet." Behind them, Kira heard someone laugh nervously, the sound breaking the tension just slightly. The largest cub, Storm, had found a vegetable stand and was nosing through bins of tubers and roots with intense concentration. "Is this food?" he asked, holding up a muddy kava root in his mouth. "Is this food?" Ash chimed in from another stand, pawing at dried seaweed strips. "Is this food? Is this food?" Suddenly, all 3 cubs were moving through the market with the unstoppable curiosity of children discovering a new world, pointing at everything, asking about everything. Their earlier nervousness forgotten in the excitement of exploration, Kira found herself jogging to keep up, answering their endless questions, watching merchants with wide eyes as they realized that yes, the galaxy's apex predators apparently went through a phase of pointing at literally everything and asking if it was food. "That's spice. You can't eat it alone, Ember. Put that down. Those are decorative crystals, Storm. Not food." I said not food. "Ash, that's someone's pet. Definitely not food." The smallest cub had cornered a very alarmed-looking fluff bird in a cage. and Kira had to physically pick him up, all 60 pounds of muscle and claws, and carry him away while he protested in a series of growls that sounded like a rockslide having a tantrum. She was so focused on cub wrangling that she didn't notice the crowd's fear had started to shift into something else: confusion, curiosity, and in some faces, the tiniest hint of amusement. Old Merchant Thrall was actually smiling, just a little, as Storm very seriously examined his entire fruit selection, asking about each variety with the gravity of a scholar conducting research. "This one?" Storm would ask, pointing with one massive paw. "Sweet fruit grows in mountains," Thrall found himself answering, his voice steadier now. "And this one?" "Sour, from ocean gardens." "And this one?" "Storm," Kira called, trying to sound stern, while Ash climbed onto her shoulders like she was a piece of furniture. "You can't interrogate every merchant in the market," but that's exactly what happened for the next hour. The cubs moved from stand to stand with methodical determination, asking about fruits, vegetables, grains, fabrics, tools, decorations. Everything was a potential food item until proven otherwise. Kira found herself explaining concepts she'd never thought to question. Why we cook some foods but not others. Why some species eat plants while others eat meat. Why anyone would want to eat something spicy enough to make your mouth burn. The cubs absorbed it all with intense focus, their amber eyes tracking her every word, their ears swiveling to catch every sound. She realized they weren't just asking about food, they were trying to understand this strange world their mother had been bringing them to, the world that had become their home when the crash took her away. The thought made Kira's throat tight with emotion she couldn't quite name. These cubs had lost everything, and they were trying so hard to make sense of what remained. When Ember carefully counted out credits from the pouch Kira had given him to pay for a bundle of dried meat, the only item they'd found that interested them as actual food, his tongue sticking out in concentration as he remembered the numbers she'd taught him. She saw several merchants exchange glances that looked almost soft. Then everything went wrong so fast that Kira's prey species reflexes barely registered the danger before it was upon them. A Korthan trader, a massive species that rivaled even adult Vrakken in size, shoved through the crowd with violence in every movement. "Abomination," he snarled, and Kira saw the weapon in his hand, some kind of neural disruptor that could drop a Vrakken in seconds. "Those creatures killed my brother on Vrakk's prime. I won't let them grow up to kill anyone else." Time seemed to slow down as Kira watched him aim at Storm. Who was closest? Who was holding his carefully purchased dried meat and looking confused about why the stranger seemed angry? Every Seraph instinct in Kira's body screamed at her to run, to hide, to let someone else be the hero. Because prey species don't survive by being brave. But she was already moving, was already throwing herself between the Korthan and Storm. Was already hearing her own voice ring out across the market with authority she didn't know she possessed. "You will not touch them." The neural disruptor hummed to life, and she saw the Korthan's finger tighten on the trigger, saw her own death approaching in the form of cascading energy, and realized with crystal clarity that she didn't regret any of it. The blast never hit her. Storm moved with the liquid speed that made Vrakken the apex predators of the known galaxy, his juvenile body still fast enough to blur. He slammed into Kira and knocked her aside, taking the neural blast full in his chest. The cub went down hard, his large body convulsing as the disruptor's energy wreaked havoc on his nervous system. "Storm!" Kira screamed, and then Ember and Ash were there, standing over their fallen brother. And for the first time since she'd found them, they looked like the predators everyone feared. Their lips pulled back from teeth designed to rend and tear, their claws extended fully, their growls shaking the air with subsonic frequencies that made every prey species in the market want to flee. The Korthan took a step back, his weapon suddenly seeming inadequate against two Vrakken cubs who'd just watched their brother fall. But Ember and Ash didn't attack. They stood their ground, protective, defensive, waiting to see what Kira needed. "Get help," Kira gasped, crawling to Storm's side, her hands hovering over his shaking body, not sure where to touch, how to help. "Someone get a medical tech, please. He's just a child, please." Her voice broke on the last word, and tears she didn't remember crying were hot on her cheeks. Ash pressed against her side, whimpering, actually whimpering, a sound Vrakken weren't supposed to make, a sound of pure distress. The market erupted into motion. Thrall was already on his communicator calling for emergency medical. Two Seraph merchants moved to restrain the Korthan, who seemed to have deflated, his weapon dropping from nerveless fingers as he stared at what he'd done. A medic arrived within minutes. Dr. Yashin, who Kira had gone to school with, who'd always been brave in the quiet way healers are brave. She took one look at Storm's convulsing form and dropped to her knees beside him without hesitation, her scanner already running over his body. Neural disruption, massive system shock, she muttered, pulling supplies from her bag with practiced efficiency. He's young though, resilient. Kira, I need you to hold his head steady. Ember, Ash, I need you too to hold his legs. Can you do that? Can you help your brother? The two cubs moved immediately, understanding, if not the words, then the urgency in her tone. They gently but firmly held Storm's legs while his body fought against the weapon's effects. Kira cradled his massive head in her lap, whispering to him in the sing-song voice she used when they had nightmares. You're okay. You're safe. I've got you. Just like I promised, remember? I've got you. Doctor? Yashin administered a counteragent, and they waited in suspended horror to see if it would work. Seconds stretched into eternities. The entire market had gone silent again, but this time it wasn't fear, it was the held breath of an entire community waiting to see if a child would survive. Storm's eyes flickered open. He made a confused rumbling sound, trying to lift his head. Stay still, doctor, Yashin commanded in her medical voice that brooked no argument. You took a neural blast, young one. You need to rest. But Storm's eyes found Kira, and his voice, weak but steady, asked, You okay? Those two words shattered something in Kira's chest. He'd taken a blast meant for her, was lying here recovering from something that could have killed him, and he was asking if she was okay. I'm fine, she managed, her voice thick. I'm fine because of you. You saved me, Storm. The cub's tail thumped once against the ground in satisfaction. And then he did the thing that made half the market gasp. He rolled slightly and nuzzled into her lap, seeking comfort like any scared child would. Ember and Ash immediately piled on, creating a mountain of Vrakken cubs, all trying to get close to the one person who made them feel safe. Kira found herself at the center of a predator puppy pile, and she started laughing through her tears because it was absurd. All of it was absurd. She was a seraph who should be running from these creatures, and instead she was buried under them while they purred loud enough to rattle her bones. I don't understand. Someone in the crowd said. Merchant Vila, who ran the fabric stand. They're Vrakken. They're supposed to be. She trailed off, seeming unable to finish the thought. Kira looked up from her position under the cubs, met Vila's eyes, and said the thing she'd been thinking for 6 weeks. They're what their mother would have taught them to be. Right now, their mother is me. So they're going to be something different, doctor? Yashin sat back on her heels, wiping her hands on her medical kit. That Korthan was wrong, she said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. He said these cubs would grow up to kill. But Storm didn't attack the one who hurt him. He defended Kira, then stood down. That's not the behavior of a mindless killer. That's the behavior of someone who's been taught love. The crowd murmured, and Kira could feel the shift happening, the moment when fear began its slow transformation into something else. Old Thrall approached slowly, holding something in his upper arms. Storm's dried meat dropped when he fell. I believe, Thrall said carefully, that someone purchased this before the incident. It seems wrong to let it go to waste. He set it down near Storm's head, and the young cub's eyes went wide with delight, despite his obvious exhaustion, over the next hour. As Dr. Yashin monitored Storm and declared him stable enough to walk, the market gradually returned to life. But something had fundamentally changed. Merchants started approaching with offerings. My daughter wanted to know if the cubs would like to try this treat, or I have some meat scraps that are going to waste anyway, or I heard Vrakken like warming stones. I have extras. Kira watched in amazement as her community, her prey species community that had every right to fear these predators, made the choice to extend kindness instead. Ash received a toy from a shopkeeper, a ball that made sounds when it moved and promptly became obsessed with it, pouncing and growling in play. Ember got into a serious discussion with a spice merchant about flavor profiles, his natural Vrakken ability to detect chemical compounds, making him surprisingly adept at identifying ingredients. Storm, still weak but recovering, was content to lie near Kira and accept pets from increasingly brave younglings who wanted to touch the scary predators and found them warm and soft. As the suns began to set, painting the market in shades of amber and gold, Kira sat on the edge of a fountain with 3 exhausted cubs sprawled around her. They'd collected bags of goods from generous merchants, had eaten more treats than was probably healthy, and had asked if approximately 3,000 different items were food. Storm's head rested on her lap, his breathing deep and even as he dozed. Ember was methodically organizing their purchases by category, his natural predator instinct for order and strategy expressing itself in the most mundane way possible. Ash had finally tired himself out with the toy ball and was using his brother as a pillow, purring in his sleep. "You know they're going to get bigger, right, Doctor?" Yashin said, settling down beside Kira with 2 cups of kava tea. "In a year, they'll be twice this size. In 5 years, they'll be fully grown Vrakken, each of them capable of taking down prey 10 times their weight." Kira accepted the tea gratefully, letting its warmth seep into her hands. "I know," she said softly. "Everyone keeps reminding me, and you're still going to keep them." It wasn't a question. "They're mine," Kira said simply. "Or I'm theirs. I'm not sure which anymore, but it doesn't matter. When I found them, I promised I'd keep them safe. That doesn't have an expiration date, Doctor." Yashin was quiet for a moment, sipping her tea. Then she said, "My grandmother had a saying, the bravest thing a prey can do is choose not to run. I never really understood it until today. Watching you step between a weapon and a predator cub without hesitation." Kira felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I wasn't trying to be brave. I couldn't let them hurt him. I couldn't. That's what brave is," her friend said gently. "It's not the absence of fear. It's fear plus love equals action." They sat in comfortable silence as the market prepared to close for the night. Merchants were packing up their stands, families were heading home, and the usual evening bustle filled the air. Several people waved to Kira as they passed, and more than a few stopped to check on Storm, to wish him well, to tell Kira that if she needed anything at all they were there. The Corthan had been taken into custody, but Kira had already decided she wouldn't press charges. He'd been acting from grief and pain, and she understood that even if she couldn't condone it, pain made people do terrible things. But apparently, so did love, because loving these cubs had led her to do the terrifying thing of defying an entire market's worth of instinctual fear. "Kira?" Ash's sleepy voice rumbled from his pile of siblings. "What is?" She looked down to see him pointing at the sunset, at the way the light painted the clouds in impossible colors. "Is this food?" Despite everything, the fear, the danger, the emotional exhaustion, Kira laughed. "No, little one. That's not food. That's just beautiful." Ash considered this seriously. "Beautiful," he repeated, testing the word in his growling voice. "Not food. Just beautiful." He seemed satisfied with this distinction, and settled back down to sleep. Ember, still organizing purchases, looked up long enough to say, "Tomorrow, more market? More learning?" "If you want," Kira agreed. "Though maybe we can avoid getting shot tomorrow." "Good plan," Storm mumbled without opening his eyes. "Getting shot not fun, Doctor?" Yashin snorted into her tea, trying not to laugh. "You," she said to Kira, "are going to have your hands very full as these 3 grow up." "I know," Kira said, but she was smiling as she said it. She looked down at her cubs because that's what they were now, hers in every way that mattered, and felt something warm and fierce bloom in her chest. They had so much to learn about the galaxy, about different species and cultures, about food and markets, and why you don't eat other people's pets. They'd point at 1,000 more things and ask if they were food. They'd make mistakes and get into trouble and probably give her a heart condition from stress, but they'd also do what they did today, choose protection over violence, curiosity over aggression, love over instinct. Not because they were Vrakken or despite being Vrakken, but because they were themselves 3 unique individuals being shaped by experience and choice. And maybe that was the real truth that the galaxy needed to learn, that predator and prey were just biological categories, but kindness and cruelty were choices. That fear was natural, but so was compassion. That the scariest monsters could look at a sunset and ask if it was food, then be content when told it was just beautiful. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Kira gathered her drowsy cubs and started the walk home. They attracted stares still, but now those stares held less fear and more curiosity. Tomorrow, they'd come back to the market. Tomorrow, the cubs would point at everything and ask their endless questions. Tomorrow, maybe a few more people would choose to see children instead of predators. But tonight, Kira was content to walk through her settlement with her impossible family, teaching the galaxy's fiercest predators that some things, sunsets, kindness, love, weren't food at all. They were just beautiful, and sometimes, that was enough.